Picture this: a low-budget movie filmed in just 20 days using only one room that somehow went on to make nearly $9 million worldwide. In 1997, a scrappy Canadian horror film did exactly that and became a classic that still messes with audiences today. From special effects that cost absolutely nothing, to psychological pressure that genuinely affected the cast, to one creative decision made in the editing room that almost destroyed the entire movie, here are 20 weird facts behind Cube. Fact number 1. They built one room and fooled everyone. Here's something that instantly rewires how you think about Cube. The entire movie appears to take place across hundreds of different deadly rooms, but in reality, the production built just one single 14-foot cube set. Every scene you see was filmed inside that same room. So how did it feel like the characters were constantly moving through new spaces? Simple, brutal ingenuity. The crew used removable colored gel panels that could be slid into the walls between takes. Red room, slide in the red gels. Blue room, swap them out. The cube itself never changed, only the light did. It was the world's most intense version of interior decorating, because if anything went wrong, the illusion would collapse. And so would the budget. This wasn't a clever trick chosen for style, it was a necessity forced by having almost no money. And somehow, it worked so perfectly that most viewers never questioned whether they were seeing different rooms at all. That's the power of smart filmmaking when there's no safety net. Fact number 2, it was shot on an insane 20-day schedule. Filming a feature-length movie in 20 days is already pushing it. Doing it inside a confined 14-foot cube with complicated death traps, intense dialogue, and mathematical puzzles that actually need to make sense? That's borderline insane. The entire film was shot in just 20 days, start to finish. No cushion, no luxury, no room for error. Most Hollywood productions take months. Even low-budget independent films usually get 30 to 40 shooting days. Cube had less than 3 weeks. That meant the actors had to be locked in from the very beginning. There was no time for extensive rehearsals or second takes. If a scene didn't work, there often wasn't time to fix it. The pressure was constant and suffocating. Ironically, that pressure may have helped the performances. The characters are stressed, exhausted, and on edge. And so were the actors. Sometimes limitations don't just shape a movie, they bleed directly into it. Fact number 3, it was filmed completely out of order. Most movies aren't filmed in sequence, but Cube took this to an extreme, and for a very strange reason. Changing the colored gel panels was so time-consuming and labor-intensive that the production couldn't afford to swap them back and forth repeatedly. So instead of shooting scenes based on the script's order, they grouped everything by color. All the red room scenes were shot first, then all the blue rooms, then the others. Narrative logic came second to survival. This meant actors often had to perform their most emotionally intense scenes before they'd even filmed basic introductions. Imagine shooting a breakdown scene from the end of the movie on your second day, before you've fully established who your character is or how they relate to anyone else. The fact that Cube still feels emotionally coherent is a testament to both the actors and the director. Everyone had to carry the entire movie in their head while filming it like a jigsaw puzzle assembled out of order. Fact number 4, the budget was basically pocket change. Let's talk money, because this is where Cube really shouldn't work. When you strip it down to actual cash, the production had roughly 350,000 Canadian dollars to work with the rest of the budget coming from donated services. That's less than what many Hollywood films spend on catering alone. Every decision in Cube traces back to that limitation. The single-room set wasn't a creative preference. It was all they could afford. The 20-day shoot wasn't ambition, it was necessity. The minimalist design wasn't style, it was survival. And yet, the film doesn't feel cheap, it feels intentional. The starkness, the repetition, the emptiness all enhance the claustrophobia. Instead of exposing the budget, the limitations sharpen the movie's atmosphere. This is what happens when filmmakers are forced to innovate instead of spending their way out of problems. Sometimes the best art is created because there is no other option. Fact number 5. The special effects were done for free. Here's the part where Cube crosses from low budget into almost impossible. The visual effects, those seamless cube movements, transitions between rooms, and mechanical shifts, were created by CORE, Digital Pictures, at no upfront cost. No payment, no budget line, nothing. The company donated their work purely to support the Toronto film industry and help launch local talent. Without them, Cube simply wouldn't exist. The production could not have afforded those effects under any circumstance. CORE essentially gambled their time and reputation on a movie that might have gone nowhere. Instead, Cube became a global cult hit, and their work was seen by audiences around the world. Fact number 6, it made nearly $9 million on a shoestring budget. For a movie that barely cost anything to make, Cube didn't just succeed, it exploded. Against all odds, the film went on to gross approximately $8.9 million worldwide. When you compare that to its sub-$500,000 cash budget, the return on investment is staggering. In industry terms, this wasn't just a hit. It was a statistical anomaly. A movie with no stars, no marketing muscle, and no studio backing managed to earn more than 20 times what it cost to produce. And that success didn't come from hype, it came from word of mouth. Audiences recommended it because they hadn't seen anything like it before. A smart, stripped-down sci-fi horror film that trusted viewers to think, interpret, and argue about what it all meant. Cube proved that originality could still punch through the noise, even in a decade dominated by big-budget spectacle. For everyone involved, especially those who worked for scale or donated their time, the box office numbers weren't just profit. They were proof that the risk had been worth it. Fact number 7. Cube became a global phenomenon, starting with France and Japan. If Cube's success in North America was unexpected, its international takeover was unbelievable. The film didn't just perform well overseas, it exploded starting with France. French distributor Samuel Hadida believed in the film so strongly that he spent $1.2 million on marketing alone, more than 3 times the movie's actual cash budget. It was a massive gamble, and it paid off. Cube went on to earn over $10 million in France, at one point playing in 220 theaters simultaneously and outperforming major Hollywood releases. French audiences connected deeply with the film's philosophical core. People trapped inside a system they didn't build, couldn't understand, and couldn't escape. Bureaucracy, existential dread, meaningless rules. Cube felt uncomfortably familiar, and just when it seemed like that success might be a European anomaly, Japan proved it wasn't. In the late 1990s, Cube became the #1 video rental in Japan, an almost unheard of achievement for a low-budget foreign indie horror film. Japanese audiences, long attuned to psychological horror and abstract systems, embraced Cube as a thought experiment as much as a thriller. Between France and Japan, Cube stopped being a cult curiosity and became something far rarer, a global phenomenon built entirely on ideas. Fact number 8, the actors were given almost no backstory. Here's a subtle, creative decision that radically shaped the film's tone. The actors in Cube were intentionally given almost no backstory information about their characters. Vincenzo Natali wanted their confusion, paranoia, and frustration to feel genuine. Not rehearsed, not intellectualized. Instead of detailed character histories, the cast was encouraged to focus only on what their characters knew in that moment. No explanations about how they ended up in the cube, no answers about who built it, no psychological safety net. The characters were just as lost as the audience. This decision heightened the tension on screen. When characters clash, panic, or turn on one another, it doesn't feel scripted. It feels inevitable. Their personalities emerge under pressure rather than through exposition, reinforcing the film's central theme. When systems strip away context and meaning, all that's left is human behavior. Fact number 9. Every character is a prison, and their names predict their fate. This detail completely changes how you read Cube. Every single character is named after a real-world prison, and the symbolism doesn't stop there. Their behavior and fate subtly mirror the reputations of those prisons. Quentin references San Quentin, infamous for violence and brutality, and if you've seen the film, you know exactly how that manifests. Holloway takes her name from a historic UK prison. Kazan references a chaotic Russian prison, matching his erratic behavior. Rena is named after a French prison known for reform efforts, and he becomes the group's moral guide. Then there's Alderson. The real Alderson prison was known for isolation as punishment. In the film, Alderson is the only character who never meets the others. He dies alone, completely cut off from the group. Even Levin and Worth both trace back to Leavenworth, reinforcing the idea that none of these people were meant to escape. This wasn't a cute Easter egg, it was a deliberate metaphor. The characters aren't just in a prison, they are the prison. Each one embodies a different way humans enforce systems, rules, and control. Once you notice it, Cube stops being a movie about rooms and becomes a movie about incarceration as a state of existence. Fact number 10. The movie never tells you who the protagonist is, and that's intentional. Most films clearly signal who you're supposed to follow. Cube refuses to do that. There is no traditional protagonist, no designated hero, no single perspective you're meant to trust. And that wasn't an accident. Early drafts of the film lean more heavily toward a central character, but Natali deliberately stripped that structure away. Instead, the film forces the audience into the same uncertainty as the characters. You're constantly reassessing who deserves sympathy, who's competent, and who might become dangerous. At different moments, nearly every character feels like the main one, until they don't. Leadership shifts, trust collapses, power moves unpredictably. This destabilization is crucial to the film's psychology. Without a clear protagonist, viewers are denied emotional safety. The result is subtle but powerful. You're not watching someone else survive the cube. You're trapped inside it with them, unsure who to follow and afraid of choosing wrong. That uncertainty doesn't just heighten tension, it is the horror. Fact number 11. They turn train noise into the sound of the cube. Most film productions would shut down if a train kept rumbling past the set. For Cube, that wasn't an option. The warehouse where filming took place sat near an active train line, and throughout production, trains would roar by, shaking the building and bleeding noise into the audio. Stopping every time a train passed would have destroyed the schedule and the budget, so the filmmakers made a crucial decision. They embraced it. The deep industrial rumble of the trains became the sound of the cube itself moving and shifting. That ominous mechanical groan you hear throughout the movie isn't a carefully designed soundscape created in post-production. It began as real-world interference, later reinforced in sound design. The cube feels massive, alive, and hostile because it was physically vibrating the set. What should have been a technical disaster became one of the film's most effective elements. It's another example of Cube turning limitations into texture and problems into mood. Fact number 12. At one point, the movie nearly collapsed under its own ideas. If the final version of Cube feels clean and focused, that's because it wasn't always that way. Early drafts of the script were wildly different, borderline unfilmable. The original version leaned heavily into surreal horror and dark comedy, featuring cannibalism, edible moss growing on the walls, and even a literal monster stalking the cube. At one point, the movie was closer to a bizarre horror comedy than the cold, philosophical nightmare we know today. It was overstuffed with ideas that competed with each other instead of reinforcing a single theme. According to Vincenzo Natali, it was his roommate who delivered the hard truth. The script didn't need more ideas, it needed fewer, so they stripped it down. No monster, no cannibal, no jokes, just people, puzzles, and pressure. That decision saved the movie. By removing everything non-essential, Cube transformed from an odd genre experiment into a relentless psychological trap. Sometimes restraint isn't just artistic, it's survival. Fact number 13. The movie was originally set in hell. Long before Cube took its final form, Vincenzo Natali had a much more literal concept in mind. His original idea, dating back to the early 1990s, was to make a film set entirely in hell. No escape, no relief, just endless suffering inside a hostile environment. As the idea evolved, Natali realized that a literal hell might feel too obvious, or worse, too limiting. But the core concept stayed intact. People trapped in a system designed to punish them without explanation. The cube became a stand-in for hell, stripped of religious meaning and replaced with something colder and more terrifying. By removing mythology and replacing it with pure abstraction, Cube became a nightmare that viewers could project anything onto: bureaucracy, society, existence itself. Fact number 14. The director filmed a short in an elevator to prove the concept. Before anyone was willing to finance Cube, Natali had to prove he could make a confined space feel cinematic, so he made a short film called Elevated. It takes place entirely inside an elevator, following a small group of people trapped together while something terrible happens outside. Elevated wasn't just a calling card, it was a proof of concept. It demonstrated that tension, fear, and visual interest could exist in a single enclosed space. Investors needed evidence that Cube wouldn't feel static or cheap, and this short film provided it. More importantly, the cinematographer used Elevated to experiment with camera placement, movement, and lighting in tight quarters. Many of those techniques were carried directly into Cube. Fact number 15. The entire set had only one working door. The Cube set looked complete with 6 doors, one on each wall, but here's the reality. Only one of those doors actually worked. Only one could support the weight of actors crawling through it, opening and closing it repeatedly during filming. The other 5 doors were purely cosmetic, props designed to sell the illusion. This meant every scene involving movement between rooms had to be meticulously choreographed so that the actors always used the single functional door, while camera angles made it look like different exits. Every shot had to be planned around that limitation. One mistake could break the illusion entirely. And yet, most viewers never notice. The misdirection is flawless. Once you know this, you'll never watch the door scenes the same way again. Fact number 16. The colored rooms messed with the actors' minds. Spending hours inside a 14-foot cube under intense lighting takes a toll, but the color of that light made things even worse. Actress Nicole DeBoer, who played Levin, later explained that different colored rooms had noticeable psychological effects on the cast. The white room felt calm, almost safe. But the red room was something else entirely. Red light is known to raise heart rate, increase anxiety, and intensify feelings of aggression. After long stretches trapped inside that cube, bathed in red, the cast began experiencing genuine psychological stress. This wasn't method acting. It was environmental pressure. The discomfort you see on screen wasn't performed. It was happening in real time. Fact number 17. They had one day of rehearsal, then straight into hell. Most films schedule weeks of rehearsals. Actors read the script together, build chemistry, and explore their characters before cameras ever roll. Cube didn't have that luxury. Because of budget constraints, the cast had exactly one day of script reading before filming began. One day, then straight into a confined cube, shooting out of order under colored lights for 20 straight days. The actors had to discover their characters while performing them. Emotional arcs, relationships, and tension had to be built in real time with no margin for error. There was no room for experimentation. Every scene had to work immediately. The fact that the performances feel coherent and often raw is a testament to the cast's professionalism under extreme conditions. Fact number 18, they wanted 6 colors, but could only afford 5. This is one of those details that only really bothers the people who made the movie. Cube revolves heavily around the number 6. 6 sides to a cube, 6 characters, mathematical patterns tied to 6. The filmmakers wanted that symbolism to extend visually as well, with 6 different colored rooms. But the budget couldn't support it. Creating another set of gel panels would have pushed costs too far, so the 6th color was cut. The result? Only 5 colored rooms made it into the final film. Most viewers never notice. But for a movie so carefully constructed around patterns and systems, that missing color represents the constant friction between artistic vision and financial reality. Fact number 19, the original ending was deleted. Remember that decision mentioned at the beginning? This is where it pays off. Vincenzo Natali originally filmed an ending that showed what existed outside the cube. There was going to be an answer, an explanation, closure. But during editing, Natali made a critical choice. He cut that scene first, completely. He understood that whatever explanation the film provided would be less powerful than the mystery itself. The cube works because it's unknowable. It has no rules you can appeal to, no meaning you can extract comfort from. It simply exists, and you're trapped inside it. By removing the explanation, Cube transformed from a sci-fi puzzle into an existential nightmare. The unknown wasn't a flaw, it was the point. Fact number 20. It launched a career and became a legend. Against every reasonable expectation, Cube went on to win Best Canadian First Feature Film at the 1997 Toronto International Film Festival. That recognition launched Vincenzo Natali's career and established him as a filmmaker capable of doing more with less. He would later direct episodes of Hannibal, Westworld, and American Gods, bringing the same controlled intensity and cerebral style to prestige television. But Cube never faded. The film is still taught in film schools, still debated by fans, and still held up as a masterclass in resourceful filmmaking. It spawned sequels, inspired countless imitators, and proved that a great idea, executed with discipline, can outlive any budget. Not bad for a movie made with one room, one door, and no safety net. Cube didn't rely on money, stars, or spectacle. It relied on ideas and the courage to commit to them. If one of these facts completely changed how you see the film, let me know in the comments. And if you caught a detail we didn't mention, I want to hear it. If you love deep dives into cult sci-fi and horror classics, subscribe for more stories about the movies that shouldn't exist, but somehow do.